everybody. Let's get started. I guess we'll start with the first agenda item. Does anybody, after looking at the agenda, have anything they'd like to change or add? No? Okay. So, hello, members of the public. This is the time for the public forum. Would anybody like to come up to the microphone and address the commission or? Great, thank you.
Hello. My name is Catherine. I'm one of the dispatchers here, and I am here about the update on regional dispatch. And I'm not sure if it would be more appropriate to speak after when there may be questions, or if I should say something about it now. Whatever the...
Do you have anything you'd like to tell us now?
We're trying very much to stay on top of this process. We're very obviously involved since this does affect our future and our livelihoods. We do obviously have concerns because it will change our job function on a day-to-day basis. So for now, we just are trying to stay invested and trying to make sure we can make it as good as we can for the outcome.
Great, thank you. Thank you for coming. Thanks. Anybody else have anything they'd like to share for the public forum part? Well, next is Chief's report.
Not a lot to report. Our work on opioids has been recognized by Michael Bloomberg and the American Health Initiative, so I'll be going to DC tomorrow through Friday to not only collaborate with folks, but also receive that recognition. It's a good sign. We now have 4 officers who we've hired for our next class. It's a pretty diverse class. We have a woman, a Sri Lankan American who has, again, a permanent resident, not a citizen. He's accepted his offer. A Vietnamese American and a white male. We're looking to get a class of 7. The next 3 likely candidates are all women, so it would be the most gender diverse hiring class we've had in. If everything, it could be the case that folks don't make it to the final hurdle, but if some or any of those make it through, then it'll be good for our gender diversity. And it also broaches the question of this gentleman from Sri Lanka who's accepted our offer is coming here specifically because he's a permanent resident, and we're one of few police departments that accept permanent residents as well as citizens. And I've got to think that there's a lot of Americans out there who want to be police officers in bigger cities who are waiting to become citizens. So we're looking for that as a recruiting opportunity. As far as that, I feel like I'm going to check myself and regret this. I feel like there's not a lot of. I mean, we'll have some executive session work, but not a lot of pressing business in the chief's report. It was a good Thanksgiving.
That's a good.
Good. No, I mean, normally there's a lot. I just.
Yeah, that's great.
I can talk. I just can't think of anything.
Chief, it does say under your report, update on regional dispatch. Was there anything that you wanted to say about that?
Yes, if we want to include that in the chief's report, right, as a lesser included, then I would like to delegate that to Lieutenant Mike Warren, who's helping oversee regional dispatch.
Good evening, everyone. So, I came to the administrative lieutenant position in April of this past year, so I came kind of partway in the middle of the process, and I had to play a little bit of catch up because I wasn't really involved in the process from the beginning. So I'm going to have to refer to some notes a little bit. I also have a document that was put together by Chief Locke recently, which was an update that was provided to the City Council, and so I'm going to refer to some of the bullet points in that as well. But if you have questions, please let me know. First off, it was around, I don't know how much you all know about the process and how it started, so I wanted to give a little bit of background and some bullet points as to kind of where we've been. So it was around April of 2016 that the mayor had tasked the fire chief, Steve Locke, with kind of moving towards a regional dispatch center for the county, for both police and fire services. It was after that that the Public Safety Committee, which was made up of 3 members, got together, they had done some research, and they made a recommendation to the City Council to move forward and put this recommendation for regional on the ballot for the citizens to vote on. The vote between the Public Safety Committee was a 2-to-1 vote, so it wasn't unanimous, but they felt it was important to put it on the agenda for the voters to vote on. In December of 2017, so just about a year ago, the City Council made the decision to put that on the ballot for the March ballot, to have it voted on by the voters, and in March it was voted on to move forward. So since then, there have been quite a few things, but a lot of them are really just to get the process moving. All 6 communities signed the document that formally created the Chittenden County Public Safety Authority, so that's the entity that's going to really oversee this whole process. And they appointed representatives to serve as board of directors. The board of directors elected Aaron Frank to serve as the chair. He's the Colchester town manager. Kevin Dorn is the vice chair, and Rick McGuire is the treasury, and also Steve Locke as the secretary. So representatives from different towns are serving those capacities. The Chittenden County Public Safety Authority joined the Vermont League of Cities and Towns as an associate member. They purchased liability insurance through Pacific Insurance. They met with the Public Safety Answering Point, the Vermont E911 board, to discuss becoming a Public Safety Answering Point, or a PSAP, as known. And once they're operational and ready, to be able to accept that responsibility, that's something that they're looking to do, to take over that. They executed an agreement with the town of Williston. So Williston is going to serve as the financial oversight for the Chittenden County Public Safety Authority. They're going to be the financial agent, so they'll conduct all financial operations approved by the board of directors. That's something that the town of Winooski is currently doing for the Chittenden Unit for Special Investigations. So it's a common thing for a town to take over that responsibility, and I think they're mirroring it after what they've done with Cousy in the past. They designed a logo for the Public Safety Authority that reflects the relationship between the emergency service providers and to the dispatchers. And they put together and published an RFP for dispatch PSAP service development, support and operations management. And so that was the most time-consuming part of the process, was putting together the RFP, figuring out what it was that would be needed, and then figuring out what entity could come and help kind of take over and do that. So the board of directors approved a contract with IXP, which is a corporation from Princeton, New Jersey. They've done a lot of regional centers where they've consolidated a lot of dispatch centers. Went through a pretty thorough vetting process to ensure that they were well suited for what we're looking to do here. The interview panel for these the entities that were competing for this included public safety chiefs, members of board of directors, and there were dispatchers that were allowed to sit in but not fully participate, but they were there. They were allowed to channel questions, I believe, to certain folks to ask questions of the entities. So IXP has been chosen, and they've been given until spring of 2019 to outline the following scope of work that I'll discuss. They need to prepare an outline for regional dispatch PSAP, including answers to 12 specific questions that the stakeholders needed resolved before regional dispatch could move forward. Primarily operational issues, how the transition would happen, how it would best be handled, the type of staffing, technology, common policies for all the different departments, how they would take everybody's individual policies and mold them into one. They are to prepare an estimate of annual operating costs for the regional dispatch entity for 5 years based on an average dispatcher wage, benefits, management fees, managerial salaries, as well as consultant estimated expenses, rent, utilities, services, a lot of different things. So they've been asked to put that together. They've also been asked to prepare an estimate of capital costs for the regional dispatch entity for the first 10 years. That would include itemized expenses per year in the categories of office furniture, equipment, fit up for the office, configuration, computer hardware, software, telecommunications, radios, equipment, all the software needed to do that. And they've also been asked to develop management services, an executive director to lead the Chittenden County Public Safety Authority through the transition of the 5 local centers that have joined in as well. So it is Burlington, Colchester, Milton, South Burlington, Williston, and Winooski that have all voted to join into the Regional Dispatch Center. So that's what's happened basically from March to now. Chief Locke has been meeting with the dispatchers on a monthly basis, trying to keep them up to speed and answer questions for them, inform them of what's been happening at the Chittenden County Public Safety Authority meetings. They do send out minutes and they discuss things that have been going on. But in the time that I've been overseeing the dispatch center and getting to know all the dispatchers in there, it's very clear, and one thing that I think is important that we don't lose focus of as a city is there's a very human element anytime that you take a group of people and you transition into something like this. And it's extremely stressful and extremely anxiety provoking for the folks that are in those positions. Some who have given 35 years of their life to the city of Burlington, and there's still a lot of questions that we don't really have answers to, or they don't have answers to yet. And for good reasons, they can't discuss these things yet, but they're still very unsure about their future employment at all. I think it's believed that they will be able to transition to the new center, but there certainly have been no promises as it relates to that. There's been no discussion around pay, benefits, retirement benefits, those sort of things. And I think it's really important that we make sure that we try and get those answers as soon as we can for those folks, because this is, their life, and their families are going to be significantly impacted by this. And I think, the right thing to do is to make sure that we take care of them through that transition, because it's going to be very difficult for them. And we want to ensure that those folks are going to be here till the end. And I think that's one of the biggest concerns that I see that we need to make sure that we're doing. So I don't know if folks have any specific questions. I can try and answer them. I don't know if Catherine has anything more that she wants to add on top of what I said, and maybe have questions for her or I. But
when you say be here till the end, what do you mean?
Well, it's a very difficult process to not know whether you're going to have a job in a year and what those benefits are going to be. And we have lost a dispatcher already recently. We have hired some new folks. But they're going through training. One just got out of training. But I think there's a very real concern that folks are going to find other jobs because the stress of the unknown is going to be too much. And if that happens, and if that happens in any significant amount of numbers, we're going to be in a very bad situation where we're not going to be able to have the staff to properly staff our dispatch center, which is going to become a problem for both the police and the firefighters.
So when do you anticipate being able to answer the questions of the dispatchers?
I'm not able to get an answer on that. And that's a pretty tough thing.
What's the launch target date for?
I don't have the answer to that.
No.
I mean, I think based on what I've heard, I think we're still at least a year out, but that goes by pretty quickly. But I'm not sure there is a definite date as of yet. There's still a lot of work that has to be done.
The total number.
It's been about a year. I'm sorry.
I thought you were finished, sorry. Is the total number of employees who are currently, you said there were like 5 centers doing it now? How does that equate to what's going to be in the end product here in terms of, the number of employees that will be needed? I assume there's some consolidation in that regard.
Yeah, and that's really part of what the IXP is going to be doing in the next couple months, is figuring that out. But I think the tentative numbers, and what I've spoken with Chief Locke, and none of this is set in stone, so I need to be real careful around what I say as it relates to this. But I think the hope is that everybody that is in a dispatch center will be able to move, because I think the staffing numbers are going to be needed, where they're going to need many staff members to be able to staff a new entity. But part of the problem and what's creating so much anxiety with the dispatchers is that they hear a lot of, it's probably going to be this, or we're hopeful that it's going to be this, but there's not any definites. And the only way to get those definites is to go through this process, but the process takes a long time. So I think there have been these loose conversations around the hope is that people would all be able to transfer over, but there's nothing guaranteed.
You may require fewer dispatchers, but you'll also need to have 911 call takers. And I've been clear, and I think Councilor Nordell, I don't want to quote her, but I know city councilors are clear from the beginning that the goal here is not to have any Burlington employee have his or her job in jeopardy. If down the road it's less staffing, it'd be better to get to that number by attrition than by termination. The proposed location for the center, South Burlington, still, it's not very far away. There's still a legitimate fear of the unknown and a big life change. It may be cold comfort, but this is a labor market. The wages that'll get paid to those dispatchers have to be competitive wages for the market. And I sympathize with the people who say on the side moving to regional dispatch, they can't make labor promises, they can't make promises about benefits. Also very sympathetic to the idea that like folks don't know what their future is going to be. But there are contours to that future, right? There has to be a certain number of employees. Our dispatchers, I do mean this, are the best dispatchers in the county because they handle the highest volume of calls. They handle full-time fire next to full-time police. They're truly 24/7. I think they'd be great applicants to any position, and that position has to pay something that will attract qualified applicants in this job market. But nonetheless, there's still this idea of knowing what you have in this building and not knowing exactly what's going to pan out down the road. And what I would be remiss about or sad, or she's very unfortunate, is a reduction in payer benefits as a result of this. I believe, and we've talked about this, that there are operational advantages to this, but I never saw this to me as this being like a cost-cutting measure. And also it is, I mean, it would be helpful if we have a lot of questions to ask the fire chief. I mean, Steve Locke is the person who's running this transition.
I only have one comment, and that is, it's one of the things about transparency. A lot of times in the private sector, you don't have the transparency of what's going on behind the scenes. In the public sector, you do. And it's legitimate that these folks have all these unknowns. One thing that at least could maybe be known is if people could be told, you will have, I'm going to make up a number, 2 months from when all the decisions are made until there's a change. So that at least if I'm an employee, I know that I'll have 2 months to find another job if I don't like what the pay or the benefits are. To think, I mean, without that, it could be a week, it could be, people try to protect themselves. So if it's a period of time that at least they can know something now, like from when the decisions are made, you will have X number of time, that may alleviate some of the anxiety that they know that there's time for them to make a move. Because there's got to be something solid they can hold on to right now. If not, it's crazy kind of unknown stuff.
Well, and to add to that, a time frame of from now to when is that time frame going to potentially start? Because in the beginning, I think it was anywhere between 1 to 2.5 years. That's a really big time frame for people to be in this unknown. So even to know that by September they're gonna have a definite date to then know X number of days from then.
But even if you don't know that, if you say, whenever we make our decision, you'll have 2 months to then decide, or a month, or whatever that, promise them something that they'll have some period of time, is the only idea that comes to me. But, Catherine, did you have something you'd like to say?
Thank you. There are just a few quick things I want to address and then a few other issues. I'll try to go more into detail. Our current contract, we are currently in negotiations, but the current one we have, we are required to get 60 days notice before we are laid off, from what I understand from our contract. So we do have that safety net built in. Obviously 2 months isn't also a lot of time to try to find a new job. One of the last Chittenden County Public Safety Authority meetings had,
You're okay.
Had notes that stated their target date for the center would be to be up and running by September of 2019, which means we now have less than a year until supposedly this center would be up and running. Some of the more general issues that don't have specific answers, one of our big concerns is that this has been very much fire department driven. And obviously we work with both police and fire. We're concerned about both police and fire. We want to make sure this is not only beneficial for us as dispatchers, but that we're not harming either of those departments by making this change. Unfortunately, and I want to make it clear, this is not from the police administration side. A lot of the times when we bring up what we believe to be significant issues, we are very much painted as just not wanting change because people don't like change, which is a little disheartening to hear when you're trying to bring up what you consider to be a legitimate issue on this matter. As far as staffing at the new center, as Lieutenant Moore referenced, we have already lost one dispatcher during this process, and with that we're also losing a lot of experience. People who know the city, know the people, know the rules, the ordinances, so we're losing a lot when we do lose people with that kind of experience. And one of our big concerns is that the new center will be based off current staffing numbers for the centers and not where they should be, because many centers are habitually understaffed through no fault of their own. So obviously to create new positions, you have to go through the city and finance board and get approval. But many centers currently should really have more staffing and they don't. So to me, we're starting off already not in the best place because we're basing it off numbers that really should already be higher.
I just want to add to what Catherine said there. We have 12 full-time dispatchers. We're allotted 12 full-time dispatchers. I think that in that schedule with 12 full-time dispatchers has 30 hours of built-in overtime automatically because there's not quite enough staff to fill all the vacancies. And that doesn't really account much for when people call out sick or scheduled vacation and those sort of things. So it's not uncommon to have only 2 dispatchers in dispatch centers. So that's for police and fire. And so if somebody needs to use the bathroom, it leaves one person. If, forget about taking breaks if there are only 2 people. So really to have it properly staffed all the time, we should be at more than 12 dispatchers, and that's a conversation we've started having. But up until recently, we were at 9, and so that's created a significant amount of overtime that we've been dealing with. It's around 160 hours a week that we're posting for fill-in and overtime hours, and that in and of itself is very stressful on the people that are working in that environment, to be in an environment where you don't get breaks. You have to wait for hours sometimes to go to the bathroom because the phones and the calls are coming in, and it's just not an option because an officer or a firefighter safety could be at risk if you do that. So Catherine brings up a really valid point that the center needs, there needs to be adequate staff for that. And so I just wanted to add to that.
I have a question for you, Catherine. A change is hard for people, and there are certainly some concerns, but I think the whole goal of this is to actually have things run better and smoother. So if you used your imagination as a dispatcher, what do you see as the potential upside of doing this?
Potential upsides obviously could be staffing numbers, scheduling issues may become resolved. We do have multiple dispatchers who have worked in regional centers before, and they've both made comments that they find the style we currently have to be better, and one is fairly adamant that she prefers what we have here. She thinks it's much more detail-oriented, much more involved, much more familiar, because you do get to learn landmarks and people and descriptions of people, and that can help at critical times. And when you go to a bigger center where you're dealing with multiple towns, you're going to lose a lot of that. Sorry, go ahead.
I do think there are some advantages that and I'm not trying to downplay any of that. There will be opportunity for advancement, whereas currently we really don't have that. There's going to be more staff, which may mean there might be shift supervisors, so there might be the ability for people to be not only dispatchers, but to take on some sort of a role as far as the supervisory. It allows them to work with other people from other communities that also are going to have things that they can experiences they can bring that can make a larger group stronger at what they do. So I do think there are benefits to doing it. I think the biggest concern is getting to that point in a way that makes that we take care of our employees in the process, and making sure that what we build is exactly what we want, because we don't want to lose valuable services for the police or fire, because the dispatchers do a really, really excellent job and hold the police officers' hands the majority of the time, doing a lot of stuff that we really rely on, that really just help us be better at doing our job. And what Catherine's saying is the concern is that there won't be the ability to do that. There's a lot of time the dispatchers know people by name, by description, and they'll start looking on cameras and they'll see the person was downtown, and they can be feeding information to officers without the officers even asking for that stuff to be done, because they understand, they know how we think, they know the processes that we go through when we do investigations, because they're here, they talk to the officers, they interact with them, they know all the officers on a first name basis. There's a lot of value to that. That certainly will be lost, but there are also upsides that we that have not worked in a regional don't fully see the value of yet.
I also just want to make it clear, we're not against this just to be against it or because it's change, even though change is obviously difficult and hard, especially with the unknown. I think a majority of the concern is based in how this process has been played out. I mean, it started in April 2016, and we weren't really involved until the last week of November in 2017. I mean, so this process went on for a year and a half with zero dispatch involvement. From that point on, it was a very quick process from the public safety council meeting to the city council meeting to the town meeting day vote. It was just a very fast process, and we felt that it was somewhat being rushed and that we weren't really allowed to have a voice in it. And to me, when you're changing something or working on something or trying to evolve something, you should really have the input of the people who know that job very well and do that job and have a really good understanding of it. And it's difficult to maintain the faith that something great will come of it, and we're not saying it won't. We're not saying this is doomed to fail or anything like that, but it's really hard when you, as a group, have been fairly left out. I do want to make it clear, I think Lieutenant Warren, since he's come in, has been doing a great job. I think he's been really good at staying impartial and focused on issues that need to be addressed, because it did become very heated at one point, which it's bound to be when your future is at stake. So
I think in the beginning, there was a lot of bewilderment and worry, and people were saying we don't need to change, the system's better now. But I do think there's a genuine willingness to say, let's see what the alternative is.
well, we're also kind of, we're in it. So
Yeah, no.
we're not going to try to torpedo it or make it bad. We want to make it as good as it can be, since that's.
No, I'm saying there's been a change in the tenor. I'm just agreeing with what you're saying. You're not just saying, I don't want change. You're saying, I want to make sure the change happens in a way that works for the city, the people, and the employees, right? Thank you for that. And I know Mike's been doing a great job of being an interface. Chief Locke did say that in the beginning, and I'm just to rehash what he would say, which the jury's out on, but it's that that they couldn't talk to the employees because it would have constituted some sort of like labor action that was prohibited by contract. I know that you weren't satisfied with that. I'm not trying to speak on your behalf. You were not satisfied with that answer.
Well, because I think some of the issues were umbrellaed into that.
Yeah.
We understood we couldn't discuss wages, benefits, things like that, but when we asked about staffing numbers
Right.
or technology setup or equipment setup, those were being umbrellaed under, well, those are labor relation issues, so we can't.
Right.
discuss
No, that's
it.
right. One of the big everyday things, I think that it's tough on the scheduling for dispatchers. I know they're ordered in all the time. There's two factors at work. So the first is the 4-day-a-week, 10-hour workday is not an efficient way to schedule something that has to be covered 24/7. But even when you move past that and look at alternatives, you still have too few dispatchers. Like even if you were to move to the most efficient way to cover a work week, and there are more efficient ways than they are now, they just don't give you 3 days off a week. It's still too short. And it's something that we've addressed with the city. The city sees the budget and says that's a workable budget, and it pays out a lot of overtime, but it makes more sense in hiring new employees. You may not see it that way, rightfully so, because it's a tremendous burden to keep on coming in on overtime, right? So just to be fair, my assessment is some of that is due to having a steady 4-day, 10-hour day work week. That is a scheduling. I deal with the cops with this too. It's a scheduling inefficiency, period. However, even when you move past that, you still have a suboptimal number of dispatchers. There would still be problems.
Yes.
So given that there's a significant amount of uncertainty still in the process, right? We have the cost estimates from IXP, and I guess, how much wiggle room is there in going forward, and also how locked in are we to having this?
Well, there's going to be a second vote. The city council has to get that information back. They have to look at it and they have to determine whether it's the right thing for the city of Burlington, and then they have to vote on it again. So we're locked in only to developing the process and seeing what it's actually going to take to do.
And do you have an estimate about when that is supposed to be scheduled?
Well, end of spring 2019 is what Chief Locke says in his, that's when they need to get all the information, the proposals for the staffing numbers, the cost, the breakdown of the 5-year cost, the 10-year cost, that sort of stuff.
Well, I think the update's been helpful. Is there anything as a police commission that we can do to support, help, whatever, in the process?
No, I mean, I think to the extent to which you have opinions about the treatment of police department employees and their challenges and their opportunities and their benefits and what they're owed as a matter of fairness, I don't mean just as a matter of a labor negotiation, but as a matter of just how processes and changes ought to happen in the city. You know, if you keep abreast of it and you have concerns, the city council is interested in this issue, right? They've said as much, so.
I mean, I think one thing we should, keep in mind, you're not just, you're going to be a dispatcher, but it will be for a whole different employer, no longer be an employee here.
One of the big concerns is having to reapply.
Yeah, and you've had a contract, a labor contract with the ASME union for 30 years, that you've negotiated, and everything that provides to you, including the wage structure and everything, is going to go away. And you're going to come into a new employer with, first of all, no representation, although maybe something will come out of that, but initially no representation and no real awareness of what it's going to look like.
Right, we're worried about that gap where obviously we can't negotiate with a different employer, but we can't form a union until after that employer is then.
Right.
He's a labor lawyer.
No, but I mean, I understand the uncertainty because everything that you've negotiated, your vacation and everything that that you have lived with all these years is going to end, and you're going to go to a new employer, and that's an unknown right now what that package is going to look like. So I think, from our perspective, one way we could support that would be to say that, there ought to be some kind of equity in the, the benefit packages that are offered to people, so that in fact there isn't, because I would think that people coming from these different places are going to have different wage structures, different benefits. Everybody who comes in is going to meld into a new organization, and I don't know how they're going to do that, because there'll be a lot of existing employees coming from, with different benefit packages and different wage schedules, and they're going to have to.
It's a new organization they're working with.
Yeah, it's going to be a new organization with a whole new schedule. So I think, we could at least take a position that, we would support. I don't know if this is the right time to do that, but, we would support, some equity in the sense of, what gets transpired as this new entity comes into place.
Primarily we're some of the, not always, but some of the higher paid, so a lot of people are concerned about the possibility of lower wages.
I think that to the chief's point, I
Right.
can't find people to work at my company, so I mean, they're going to have to be competitive to.
Yes.
to
It's just what we're worried about is that's going to be competitive to majority, and that people here may have to walk into a pay cut. Because the majority of people may be coming from departments that have a much lower wage, so for them it's great, and I hope they get some benefits from this. That would be amazing. I don't want to harm any other dispatchers from other agencies in this. But there is a very serious concern that since we are some of the higher paid, that we would then have to take that hit.
Does anybody have any other questions? No, this has been helpful. Catherine, thank you very much for
Thank you.
coming. It's
Thank
great
you.
to have you
Thank you.
at the commission meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Guys, have a nice night.
Okay. Letters of commendation.
I didn't have any, not to say there are no wonderful comments and feedback from the community, but I didn't have anything specific before I sent out the email. I've had a few sentences, but I'll bring them to the next.
Okay.
It is live.
I'm sorry, there's one, sorry to interrupt you, but I don't have it with me, I put it online when we policed a protest where people were worried about the potential. Believe it or not, in Burlington, they wanted to keep Jeff Sessions as the Attorney General. So, because your enemy is your friend or something like that. So there's a protest for that. And we got a letter from the marshals of that protest saying our officers did outstanding work and that they're proud to be protesters in the city that's policed by those officers. And if you don't believe it, I put it on Twitter. I photocopied I took a picture of the note, cropped out the signature line, and stuck it online, so you can just see that for the record.
Okay.
It's all on your Twitter feed.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So this submission is live, and the city just transitioned to a remodeled website. So hopefully it's a bit easier to navigate. So certainly encourage folks to go online and do so.
Great. Thank you, Laura.
Mhm.
Update on role of police commission. The city attorneys made all the changes to the document that everybody has. Role of Burlington Police Commission in reviewing complaints against police officers. Nick and Eileen went and took all the comments and feedback we had, updated this. I think, in my opinion, we're good to go before public safety and make our recommendations and give them this document. I know folks from the last meeting until now, we're going to schedule meetings with Chief Wright and review the complaints that we were given. Did folks do that? And those that did, how did that process, how did that go?
Worked well. I had a couple, I thought, good questions, and they were answered well.
Great.
I still need to meet with Jan. That was my bad. I was supposed to call you and I didn't do that, so.
And I was traveling, so I have a meeting next week with you, Jan.
I've done mine with Jan. Yeah, it was fun. I
Good.
think we had good discussion and a good review of the facts. And
Good.
Problem-free.
Problem-free.
Extremely easy, I suppose, cases. is a good word.
They're assigned at random, I just want you to know.
If you say so.
So, I think good work. This was a few months of really trying to get this nailed, so thank you, everybody. And if anybody is interested, I'd love company in going to the Public Safety Committee meeting. I'll send an email out when I get confirmation. I haven't heard back from them. If anyone wants to join me, that would be great. And then we'll have done our piece. Okay. Any updates or comments from any commissioner?
Well, so, I'm not sure whether you were asking for any feedback on the updated role of the Burlington Police Commission. That looks fine to me. So,
Okay,
yeah.
great.
As far as commissioner updates, I'll just say I had some conversations with some members of the community, including members of the New Immigrant Committee in Burlington, who had, first wanted to express their thanks to the Burlington Police Department for being willing to engage in officers' events, but I think there's also some, I wouldn't call it concern right now, but some wish for greater engagement with officers. Right? So in particular, whether officers are attending more community events, there's also been some concern that officers aren't as visible around the community, partly because I think there have been decreased number of foot patrols, probably I think due to staffing issues. But there's just a wish, I think, for more engagement, greater follow-up, things like that. And so I would encourage the police department to find ways to get officers out in the various communities, talking with people. I think there's also the thought that sometimes they get invited to events, they show up to events, but they also can group together in the back and don't really talk to people and engage very much. And I think that'll go a very long way towards improving community police relations in general.
So I'd like to come back to that when Chief Murad is here at the next meeting at a good point, because I think I agree with a lot of what you're saying. There have been fewer cops out on foot, that's true. Also, and I think there's no downside to having cops out on foot. In the winter, there's going to be fewer, but I mean even in the summer and fall there weren't. And we tried hard to do outreach where we would hold pizza parties or at the at Franklin Square or places where the old St. Joe's, right, the AALV, where we knew that folks would feel comfortable going. We weren't asking them to come to the police department. And it was interesting, like we got an audience, but we never felt like we quite had the level of engagement. I think the language barrier is sometimes a real problem, and I think we have to find, to be honest, more organic ways to do it, rather than like staged events. We get folks to come to those, but I would just rather have it be in the natural course of business, even if it's an officer that has the time to periodically, and I just rarely go into every business for example, North Street. So you're right, and I think our officers, when they do it, we get great reviews and do a good job. I just think we need to increase the frequency and the organic nature of it.
I think there's another, just to follow up on this, there's another, I guess I'd say suggestion which was made, which follows up on this, which was that when there are calls for service in the community, that there's very often not very much follow-up on those calls for service. So if an officer is called in for some domestic incident, they don't necessarily hear anything again from that officer, from what happened, or just to hear whether or not something was something needed to be done in the future. And there's some question. I'm not sure quite what the request for greater follow-up engagement was, but I think there's a request for greater follow-up engagement as well.
No, it's really interesting because that's one of the. It's not just the new American community that feels that way. One of the biggest issues in American policing, when it's 911 response policing, is lack of knowledge about what comes of the response and lack of follow-up. That's a whole. I could talk about that happily. Not that I'm going to. Although you don't believe me, for hours I could talk about this. But what we're hoping for is Sergeant DeFranco, for example, he just got promoted from police officer sergeant. You were there for the promotion. Great supervisor. Like one of my hopes is by cultivating leaders like that, like he specializes in follow-up. And I'm hoping to have a cadre of officers as we hire these new cops and get closer to or above 100 to go ahead and do that, because there's it's a strain of American policing that I don't like. That is, the officer sees him or herself as a person who stays in a car, waits until they're dispatched somewhere, goes there, handles the situation like in the proximate sense, and then leaves. But that's like everything. That's not just new Americans getting short shrift. That's like every type of American getting short shrift. So I'd love to, again, I'd love to have Chief Wright and Chief Murad and some of our supervisors in on a conversation about this. I think it would be great as well. We have our staff meetings, our supervisor meetings, much more frequently now. Did we set a date? Did we set a date for our next one yet? Not yet. But every 4 to 6 weeks we have one. If you want to come to that meeting, if you can, we'll make it accommodate your schedule, or any of you, and talk about these concerns. I'd love to hear what our supervisors say in response, because I think you'll get some folks who kind of like throw up their hands, but others who feel this acutely as well. And hearing it from the community is going to mean, they'll just say, yes, chief, whatever you say, but you can engage them a little more substantively. So, yeah. Would you like to do that?
I would.
Yeah, okay, good.
Great.
I'll say one last thing on that
Yeah.
note. There was also, I think, some, again, so this is, in talking to people at AALV specifically, there was some thought that officers will use AALV as a useful resource for accessing the community, but they want to emphasize that they are not the community themselves, that they themselves serve the community. And so I just thought that instead, rather than saying, especially when officers want to engage the community, they say, let's host an event, let's do something with AALV.
Yeah.
I just thought, look, you should really be talking also with people in the community broadly speaking, not just people who, you know.
No, that's a great point. And one of the issues we have is the ability to communicate, like to blast. Like I wonder how many members of the refugee community are on Front Porch Forum, for example. I mean, there are ways that we communicate, like through business associations, right? If you want to get a meet, I know how to, I can reach the entirety of the Church Street business community, not just the downtown business community. I can get them on the phone now, right? All these small business people, medium-sized business people. I can reach thousands of Burlingtonians to Front Porch Forum. If you said to me, how do you get in touch with the refugee community? I'd say refugee resettlement or the AALV. I don't know, I'm being candid. It's this, because I'm feeling like I set this as a priority for myself 18 months ago, and I made very little progress. I still wouldn't be able to tell you how to just really get a message out to the refugee community unless it was through these very obvious and pro forma and limited means.
I think that's actually something they'd be happy to work.
Yeah.
Addressing, yeah, just have work with you on figuring out what they.
Yeah, no, I would love to figure that out. So.
Great, thank you. I just had one, and I just remember today, Shereen and I both got our bios to Laura, which we need to do. So if you haven't done it, if you could this week or, you know, it didn't take long. We didn't do giant ones. Just get your bios to Laura. That was a request by the leadership in the department so that people would get to know us a bit better. So maybe we can send out a reminder email. Just out of curiosity, because I know Chief just said he's getting an award for the work on opioids.
Recognized, yeah.
Recognized. Has anyone else signed up or let Laura know to go to ComStat or Substat? No, I'd recommend it. I just think it's.
So yeah, the irony is I think Community Stat's on, I'm sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
It's on Thursday. I'm not going to be there. I'll be getting the award for the recognition for Community Stat. But it's Thursday if you're free and you want to go, and graveyards are filled with indispensable people, so it'll go on when I'm out of town. It'll be just fine. You'll just hear less of me. But December 20th is the next one. It's a change from the normal schedule.
Okay. I just recommend it. I think it'll really inform all of you.
Yeah, I mean, you were there. You want to share it? It would be helpful maybe to share.
I did
impressions of it?
last
Okay,
time.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, that's okay. I did, but highly recommend it. And then I also just want to follow up, just so that doesn't fall off people's radar, the Community Police Academy. You know, I signed up to do it, and apparently, you know, and I can't make, I think the last two, I'm out of town, and I was told, don't worry about it. So even if you can't make all of them, I think it would be great as commissioners for us to do that, so. Anything else under updates and comments? No? Okay. Minutes of the previous meeting, the consent agenda. Does anybody have any changes to that? No? Somebody want to make a motion to accept?
I'll make a motion, we accept.
Thank you, Peter. Second?
Yeah, second.
Second? Okay, great. I don't know about anybody else, but I really think I'll be busy on December 25th, so we should probably. One of the things that we were talking about before the meeting started is, do we want to, I think we have two choices. One is to not have a meeting in December, and if our charter allows us to do that, or have it December 18th. So I don't know if anyone knows. Can we skip a meeting in December? Or should we have it December 18th?
I don't know the answer to that.
How about I look into it?
Okay.
I'll try to do that tomorrow. And maybe we'll assume we're okay to skip it, and I will try to let you know in the next few days. And then.
If not, the 18th, then probably.
Yeah. Yeah, that would be great. Does anybody feel strongly that we should not skip it? No?
Okay, skipping it.
It's probably a lot going on in the month of December. All right.
So we'll go
Thank
to
you, Laura.
So then, just if we are skipping, it would be the 22nd of January.
Yes,
Right. Would be our next meeting.
right.
Okay. It sounds like we need an executive session, Chief?
Yes.
Okay.
So I'm looking to go into executive session to talk about, I guess, employee.
Matters, disciplinary investigations which may result in discipline.
Okay. Second? Thanks, Randall. Okay,